Let's talk about something which is something of a political football, and it was at PMQs yesterday. But I'm trying to take the politics out of it because it shouldn't be a political football. It should be about simply us all having enough homes to live in that we can afford. I know, crazy idea. We had accusations yesterday from Keir Starmer that Rishi Sunak was killing the dream of home ownership. Accusations back about the number of homes that have been built. Let's try and get to the bottom of it about what is really happening with James Hummerstone-Pope, who's a housing expert. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'd like to leave aside who said what and who said when and who's accusing what, because that's not the day for that, the day of local elections. But I do want to talk about, where we actually are in terms of the number of homes that are being built, where they're being built, and whether they are actually affordable to people. Yep. So we have lots of claims and counterclaims about which government has built the most homes or not the most homes. But a lot of this is almost irrelevant. It's where the homes are and how much the darn things cost, because there was a long time when we had what were so-called affordable homes that were 400 grand each. That's not affordable to most people.
I mean, if we break it down, quite frankly, house prices are obscene at the moment. And when we look at the average UK house price compared to the average UK salary, it's over 10 times what people earn they're spending on a home, and that's just in the average, which as I said is absolutely obscene. Yeah. And then when we look at where those homes are needed, it's well documented that the southeast and the south of the UK is quite frankly, well, there's barely any homes, barely anything being built. In local areas, people think, well, do you know what? All we're seeing is new homes being thrown up left, right and centre.
Yeah, but my local area, it's non-stop building work.
Yeah, and to be honest, around the corner from me, it feels like it's non-stop. But the reality is that when we put that into raw numbers, a target of 300,000 new homes, the closest the government have ever got to building that number of homes is 220,000. But the other part of that is to build the deficit that we need. There's been many reports that say that on that trajectory of 300,000, it's going to take close to 50 years to build. And the other stark realization is that to build them quick enough, we need to be building in the region of 442,000 homes for the next 25 years.
A year?
Well, yeah, 442,000 homes a year for the next 25 years. Wow. Or if we want to eat into that even quicker, that's 654,000 homes a year. And then when we say, well, the most we've built is 220,000, it just smacks as we're in trouble.
We're just not touching the sides of it. And that's the key thing, isn't it? Because it's not only the historic immigration levels we've seen since, really since about 97, 98. And then, we opened up to Eastern Europe and just a million, the millions of legal migrants coming to this country who have remained here. So an extra 5 million, plus, of course, the children that they've had, more families as well over that time. But also the huge levels of, again, legal migration that have been coming in from non-EU countries, particularly the Indian subcontinent in the last couple of years. Huge, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of more people every year. But we are not building enough new homes. Now, each of those people doesn't need a home themselves, obviously. No. But often those figures don't actually count the dependents, the children who would make up that home. But the crucial thing is we also, even if there'd been none of that extra immigration, net immigration in this country, we would need more homes simply for the fact that we are an ageing population. People are living longer, so they're keeping their home for maybe 10, 20 years longer than they would otherwise, not, downsizing in that home, therefore going to the family. We're also, people are, sadly, rate of family breakup. So, people are not in just one home. And also younger people are taking longer to settle down and get married. So they're not moving from, parents' home straight into a family home themselves. So we need more homes, even if we had the same number of people. Once we're ageing as well, we need more. And then you add on net immigration. Did anyone in government of any political hue ever think maybe we might need more places for people to live?
To be honest, I don't think it's crossed their minds. And the reality is, and you talk about growing population. I've looked over the figures over the last couple of days, and the reality is over the last 3 years, we've grown somewhere in the region of 230,000 people. Again, yes, we don't need one home for one person, but the reality is that we're just not building enough. And I think that if we look at the decision to scrap that house build target, and we hear about it being pressure from backbenchers. The reality is I think it's just the reality is that it's not being delivered. And rather than hold hands up and say, we need to build more, but we're struggling, it's let's just try and wash that under the carpet and not build as many.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing about the housing costs is there was a time we spent routinely a third of our take-home pay on our housing, way more than most other people in most other comparative European countries. And now for a lot of people, certainly young people living in the southeast, jobs like in in the media, where and many other professions where actually that's where you have to go and make your living, looking at paying half of their take-home pay. When people are having to spend that much of their money on their housing, they don't have it to spend on other things. And it also means people are very limited in their life choices. So you've got young people coming out of often uni now, huge debt they've got to pay. They can't afford to save up. They've got huge rent, can't afford to save to buy somewhere. People who are not able to buy often say, well, we're not ready to get married and have children. They're not settling down. We've got an economic crisis looming, as all countries do, really. Western countries and Japan and China and others, where we've got an ageing population. Our own young people are not having children. Some lunatics think that the world's going to end and things, they're eco-cultists, but for most people, they can't afford to, or they're only having one instead of maybe two or three. And they can't afford to because they can't afford the housing. They're in one-bedroom studios, which they're renting. No, funnily enough, they don't feel like they can have a kid at 30 and settle down. So this has massive repercussions on people's lives, their jobs, their life choices, their relationships, and indeed long-term on economy. It's a really false economy to not build the houses that people need, and houses, not flats, houses that people need to raise their families.
Well, and that's the thing. Again, looking at the data, it's quite frankly, not building these houses is stifling the whole economy because, as you say, it goes on to people deciding not to start a family or starting their family later. It means that rents, I've got friends that are paying 2/3 of their salary just on rent. And
for a very they're not living in Kensington, they're living in basic homes. Yeah.
They're not living in a Versace tower somewhere. They are living in one-bedroom flats overlooking a motorway. Yeah. And the reality is that they can't afford then to save and buy. So the crux of it isn't, as you've pointed out previously, it's not just more homes, it's more affordable, and actually affordable, because there are many schemes that sell themselves as affordable housing. It's frankly absolute rubbish. They're not affordable. You just get a smaller mortgage and pay the rent on the rest of it.
And indeed, and also a lot of the homes that are being built in my area, again, they're like the commuter belt homes, or they're homes, for young couples, maybe 2 salaries you could afford these places. But often these places aren't even marketed to people in this country. They're marketed abroad. Even, homes not just concentrating on the southeast, Manchester and elsewhere. These homes are sold as investments to foreign buyers. Exactly. Now, a lot of countries, Switzerland, you're a foreigner, you can't buy a home. Sydney, in Australia, it's really difficult if you're a foreigner to buy it. And this isn't xenophobia. This is just about, it's very different from someone being able to buy a car. Okay, you buy a car, I buy a car. But if you buy a house, that bit of land is gone. That's not available to someone else. The competition for land is far greater. Do we need to have controls on selling homes abroad? Certainly, areas near me, some pretty wealthy areas, virtually everybody who owns a home there is foreign born and actually often still living abroad. Those homes are empty most of the time when people are crying out for a home.
Yeah. I think there's definitely room for some controls. It does come down to what, I think it's individual circumstance, which then makes it very difficult to govern. But the reality is, if you've got someone buying a second home as a holiday home and they're spending 2 weeks a year there, that needs to be looked at very, very strictly, because it's just unfair. But if you've got someone who's buying a second home in London, for example, and they're a business person who flies to and from and actually uses it frequently, then you can understand it. But buying multiple homes, whereby you're never really using them, or very, very rarely, you are taking valuable housing space away from the local community.
And people just can't compete with that international rate set. Again, people think, that's just affecting central London. No, it creeps out the home counties, and it creeps out it does actually affect the whole country eventually, because it just pushes everyone up. Really good to talk to you, James Hummerstone-Pope, a housing expert. Thank you for that.